Hi, I'm Ray, and I'm the owner of Rose Sign Language Interpreting Company here in Colorado. Our video today is going to cover a pretty common question we get here in the office, which is, do I need to hire a sign language interpreter for a job interview? First of all, I'm not a lawyer. I run an interpreting agency, so I've got a pretty good knowledge of how the ADA applies in a variety of situations, but I'm not a lawyer. If you have specific legal questions, I highly encourage you to get in touch with your company's legal counsel. So, with that said, let's get started. A deaf or hard of hearing job applicant has asked you to provide an interpreter for the job interview. This might be new to you, but the deaf or hard of hearing person is doing this because they understand their rights under the federal ADA law. This is the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. This law somewhat leveled the playing field for people with disabilities in the workplace. It removes barriers so that people with disabilities have access to jobs. The removal of those barriers in ADA language is called a reasonable accommodation. Interpreters are listed in the ADA specifically as a reasonable accommodation. So while this might be kind of new to you, this is something that's been around for quite some time. Again, this law came about in 1990. Interpreting has been in place long before that as well. So the deaf person is a little bit ahead of you, but we're going to help you catch up. So they have asked you to provide an interpreter for the interview, and as I mentioned, this is a reasonable accommodation. Now, you might be thinking, well, it's not that reasonable. This person isn't even an employee yet, and we're going to have to pay for an interpreter. Well, something else to understand about the ADA law is that it deals with discrimination and people with disabilities. To not allow a person with a disability to even interview for a job is considered discrimination. That's something else that the ADA law does, is that it protects people who are deaf or who have other disabilities from discrimination based on their disability. So now you might be thinking, well, you know, interpreting is not really in our budget. We didn't know about the law when we set our budget for this year. This doesn't seem reasonable. And as you start looking into the website, www.ada.gov, which is a great idea. You should really go and look and see the language of the law yourself. They have wonderful technical manuals. They can really help you understand a lot more of the ins and outs of this law. As you're looking around on there, you might see something called undue hardship, and it might, if you're worried about your budget, it might be a little exciting because you're thinking, well, this wasn't in our budget. This is an undue hardship. We don't have to provide an interpreter. Probably not. That exemption, that loophole is probably not going to work for you. Undue hardship refers to extreme hardship. This isn't. They're not talking about knocking your budget out of whack, or you know, maybe you're not even going to hire the person, so how does it make sense to pay for the interpreter? What they're talking about is, you know, will providing this reasonable accommodation, be it a wheelchair ramp, be it an interpreter, will this put the company out of business? That's my understanding of undue hardship, and it's very hard to prove. It is not often successful when it is brought to court. So again, I would encourage you to get in touch with your company's legal counsel before you claim undue hardship, because it may actually just be a case of discrimination, whether that was your intent or not. So be very careful. And one way that I like to kind of help people understand as they get started with using interpreting services is, you know, sometimes our printer breaks and we just need to buy a new printer. Or I've recently, as the owner of this company, realized, wow, we need more help. And I have had to hire more people. I just did. We needed more stuff done, so I hired more people. It wasn't in the budget, but I made it work. You make things work every day in your office. You guys probably pull off some pretty cool stuff in your office. I know what it's like. You can make this work as well. And the plus side is that you are not breaking a federal law, and you are doing your part to make sure that you are not discriminating against people with disabilities and keeping people with great skills and talents out of your office where they can be doing some really great work. So just a heads up, after this interview, you may decide that you love this deaf person. You want them in the office, you want them in a cubicle, you want them doing their thing for your company. There will be more interpreting services after this. That'll come up in a video that we're going to be shooting in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. So again, if you have any questions, do look at www.ada.gov and get in touch with us at rosesignlanguage.com. Thanks.